Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome all to our webinar, Navigating Trade Compliance. Today, this morning, my name is Mikko Lehtonen. I come from Finland, Satakunta University of Applied Sciences. And I would like to warmly welcome you all to this webinar on behalf of me and my great colleagues and friends from Latvian Chamber of Commerce, Estonian Chamber of Commerce, and Satakunta University of Applied Science. This morning's webinar will cover important things. We will go through, for example, trade compliance, how it works in practice, importance of compliance for international business, international frameworks and regulations, and legal framework governing trade compliance in Azerbaijan. And at the end of this webinar, you will have a chance to have questions and answers. And also, I know that some of you have sent questions before at registering to Sevda, and we will send these answers to you via email after this webinar. We have a great expert about these issues today presenting these topics, Ms. Sevda Huseynova. She works as a compliance manager at SOCAR Midstream and is now located in sunny Baku, which is great. The spring and summer is coming and we are in good hands. I won't talk too much, so Sevda, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the great introduction. Also, good morning to all of you. It's early morning for many of you. This is morning still for us in Baku, but the early morning for you. So yes, as it was already provided in the introduction, today we will cover the topics of the trade compliance, and I will do my best to clear up all your questions that you may have on the trade compliance. Just now, tell me if you see my screen. 1 second. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
And second. Okay, very good. So we can kick off and start if we are all ready. So any questions at this stage? Anyone wants to greet us or any comments before we start? No? Then okay, let's kick off. So today's agenda, yes, we will look at how the trade compliance works in practice, because we hear a lot about what's the trade compliance, why do we need it? So we'll see how it works in practice. And we will see similarly what are the international regulations, international framework for the trade compliance, and compare it in the versus what the key legal framework for Azerbaijan is, and who is doing what on the exports and imports on ensuring the trade compliance in Azerbaijan. We will also look to the export process. Step by step, we will see the customs process, the use of brokerage, and what kind of documents, licenses, permits, or whatever we need. So here, this is me. As it was mentioned, I'm working for the SOCAR Midstream. I have the certification, international certification on ethics and compliance. I hold a PhD and dealing with a lot of things on the compliance that I will not go into the details. But at the same time, I'm the member of the OECD Business Integrity Group, which enables me to be well aware of the European requirements on the business integrity, on the trade compliance and the compliance in general, and to contribute it mutually from Azerbaijan and the European market perspective. Here, now, I would like you to scan this QR code and let me know if I want to understand the auditorium, how familiar are you with trade compliance? This is just anonymous, just a survey for me to understand how to the details should I go. So please scan this QR code. Let's allocate 3 minutes for this and provide your responses. And I will track it in my screen here. Okay. Good. So we have also an expert. Very good. I may also seek for support from you. And here, in general, the people are not much aware, which is very realistic because this is while we are doing the businesses, we are not always familiar, not always go into details of the trade compliance, especially when we are working, operating, and doing business in Europe. This is totally understandable because the Europe has the one market, unique, united market, and united regulations. So there is not much hesitance on thinking about the procedures. So that's why that's completely okay. Okay, I think we can go back to our slide. Here we go. So, trade compliance. What is the trade compliance? So this is an aspect of the corporate compliance which ensures that all import and export transactions are in conformance with the laws and regulations. Adherence to the trade compliance best practice is also important for the in-country transfers, of course, but international trade compliance is quite complex. So companies that export and import internationally, they specifically need to comply with the complex regulatory framework imposed by multiple governing bodies, countries. So, and these regulations are often not harmonized across the trading nations, and navigating these requirements amid a volatile global trade environment that is, of course, increasingly challenging. And trade compliance teams also face the challenges. Often there are the pressure on minimize the shipping impacts for the interconnected global supply chains, and there is also the need for the fostering the shipment, and at the same time there is an increased burden of trade compliance and the due diligence requirements by the government and the company requirements. So, as if that's not enough, the regulatory and enforcement climate of export and import controls change quite rapidly, and in some cases with little warning, so we are not always well aware of what's going to change. And also nowadays the many countries are being exposed to the sanctions. The sanctions question is arising, and the countries change their sanction policies to address the current state of foreign affairs, and that's why it gets complicated. Here you see the key elements of the trade compliance, which starts with the tariff classification. This is for the correct and complete information. The goods must be correctly classified according to the commodity and tariff codes. What they are, this classification provides the understanding and the group of the items that needs to be subject to the duty rate, the customs rate, and any incorrect classification will raise a red flag, of course, and it may trigger an investigation, which can lead to fines and the other problems. So internal teams should accept the responsibility and control over this information and not delegate, and it's advisable not to delegate this responsibility to any other parties, including the brokers. But if you delegate this to the brokers, you need to cross-check, of course. So preferential and non-preferential origin. The following the preferential and non-preferential origin rules is also essential. Preferential rules of origin apply in reciprocal trade preferences, usually within the customs unions and within the regional trade agreements, or in non-reciprocal trade preferences, usually in favor of the developing countries in that case. So if goods that are being exported have a preferential origin, they may attract reduced or the zero customs rate, duty rates, while entering the importer's country. So this is very important to understand. So you have to be very careful, because this may result in liability for unpaid duty, even for up to the 3 years period. But non-preferential origin is required in general on all international shipments and dictating the origin of the product that is being shipped. Incoterms, establishing Incoterms is not legally binding. This are the globally recognized trade terms. So this is not the law, this is not the contract itself. This is advice, recommended contract items, and the globally recognized terms, and they provide a clear definition of the buyer and the seller's responsibility during the shipment life cycle, starting from the very start stage until the end delivery. And it includes the details everything, including the delivery risks and liabilities, on which party the risks and liabilities will be put. Incoterms must be established and applied by all involved parties to avoid confusion and the payment errors. We will later talk more about on this. It's just a general introduction. So licensing, of course, their responsibility is on the importer and exporter to determine whether or not they require license, permit, or special certification. And failure to do this, failure to identify what licenses, permits, or documents you need to acquire before the export process starts, or within the export process, may lead to fines and, of course, in the worst case, the confiscation of goods. License management controls, this must be strictly and diligently applied through this process. Export controls, the another element of the trade compliance. The certain goods and even the underlying technology are subject to export control legislation, as they may have harmful uses. All products must be classified. Again, we are coming to the classification. This should be the clear classification, so that on the export controls, you are able to prove the real purpose of the items and the sources and all other elements throughout the process. And customs management, this is the separate process. We will look in the details later in another slide, how the customs is being managed, and special focus will be in Azerbaijan. What is the practice in Azerbaijan to manage the customs? On screening the customers, vendors, and transaction data lies in the heart of the trade compliance, actually. And it's not enough just to effectively screen the vendors and suppliers through the sanctions list that are available online and have the open access. No, that's not enough. They have to be done the diligent and very thorough know your customer KYC or due diligence processes to understand and to see the owners, the ultimate beneficiary owners, and identify other red flags. So on the valuation is also the part of the item being prepared for the export evaluation. You need to provide the clear value of the exported goods and services, because this impacts definitely the customs duty that will be applied. So saying this, we go to next, the key risks for the trade compliance. Here you see the description, you see the not the description, but the vision of the key groups of the compliance risk. The first is the denied party risk, of course. Governments and some regulatory authorities, bodies, they are maintaining the denied party risk. And this contains the individuals, companies, or entities restricted from the trade due to national security, sanctions, or compliance violations. Risk, what is the risk? Risk is that engaging with a denied party can result in a hefty fines, loss of export privileges, and legal action. How you can mitigate this is that you need to regularly screen the business partners against the sanctions list. We have the OFAC, EU sanction list, and etc. On the documentation, the accurate and complete trade documentation, invoices, certificates, licenses, handover acts, or compliance, ISO standard compliance documents, if needed, are to be in place, because this all are required at the customs, depending on the group of the items. This here is that the errors, omissions, or falsifications can lead to shipment delays, fines, and the future audits or investigations. And regarding the respective authorities, the trade activities must comply with the laws and regulations set by relevant authorities, and specifically the European Commission, World Trade Organization, and in many cases the US Department of Commerce. Yes, we will talk about how the US trade laws are affecting us, although we are not locating in the US territories. Later we will talk about this as well. And there is also the hybrid sanctions risks. The hybrid sanctions refer to multilateral, unilateral, or sectoral trade restrictions imposed on specific industries, individuals, and regions. And these are not only the financial restrictions, embargoes, there's also the trade bans or limitation of the access to the market, and etc. And the key risk here is that the non-compliance can lead to blocked transactions, assets can be frozen, and there can even be the criminal charges. Therefore, mitigating this, we need to implement the robust screening tools and establish a compliance framework to manage sanctioned transactions and to prevent such transactions, actually. The fifth group is the supply chain related risks. So global supply chains are vulnerable to compliance risks, and this can include the forced labor laws, import and export controls, and even the supply integrity. Because this is the third-party risk, our supplier chain brings us, along with their services, they bring us also their third-party related risks, which, when investigated or when being charged, we cannot just say that it's not our failure, but our suppliers or third parties' failure. In many cases, this doesn't help. So we need to manage it. And the risk here is that if we use the non-compliant suppliers, that may cause supplier disruptions, legal liabilities, and reputational harm, of course. How we mitigate this? Of course, a due diligence check, and we need to perform the risk assessment of the suppliers, identify their risk levels, and we need to ensure that they are well in line and aligned with our compliance requirements as well. And next, so the global trade brings the different points and perspectives. And if not to follow the global trade requirements, it is being subject to, it can bring the consequences as violations, and sometimes even we cannot realize to what extent. The good thing of being compliant is that it brings the benefits, although it doesn't give any trophies for following the trade laws. But in general, doing things correctly means minimal delays, avoiding fines and penalties, and smooth export process, which, of course, at the end helps your business to grow. The bad thing is that there are lots of laws changing, risks are growing, which result in the even very small mistakes become to be a big consequences, bring up consequences. This can also mean that, as I said, fines, getting fired, or even being subject to imprisonment. So for the company, and it also has the legal liabilities. It can close some market doors to your company, or it can hurt anyone in the company and all customers. And the very ugly part of this is that violating trade rules can lead to dangerous outcomes. So unintentionally, you can be supporting the criminals or dangerous regimes, or break the foreign policy of your country. So even the items that you are exporting can turn into the weapons against your country, which we will see in the real example that happened. Here, what's export? A quick question. How many emails and phone calls did you make last week at work? And how many of them were to the calls and emails to abroad? Can you just type in the chat box, please? Think about it for a moment. Okay, guess what? These are all exports. Yes, export is the physical shipment of goods, technology, technical data outside the country customs regime territory. However, this is not only the goods and technology and technical data. Downloads and emails of technology and technical data outside the country, even here, be careful, sharing technology with a foreign national, even on the soil of your country, is the export, and this is called the deemed export. So this is not only the goods and services, this is the softwares, calls, texts. Here you see even the examples. If you transfer any item out of your country to another country, It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how it's transferred, physically or digitally. It doesn't matter whether the money is involved, paid or not paid, or there are some things that you may not realize that these are the exports. Here the examples, if you bring your work device on an international trip, this is an export. Just we are understanding what the understanding of export is. Of course, some of these you may argue that this is not there for the earning purposes. For example, if I take my laptop to another country, how this can be understood as export if I'm not giving it to another party. Yes, you personally use it, you own it, but you change the location of the item. This means that the data is being exposed, the device is being exposed to the rules, regulations, and being existent in another soil, just roughly saying. So, on the international frameworks and regulations, here you see the most significant international laws regulating the trade compliance. Don't be, how to say, confused or thinking that why we are talking about the US laws. We will provide the clear link to that. So the key one is the Export Administration Regulations, EAR. This is a very famous one, and this is enforced by the US Department of Commerce. And this is the key law to control, we have to control the export and re-export of certain goods and technologies. Here also the international traffic in arms regulations, we say it ITAR. This is also enforced by the US government, the US Department of State, and this law restricts and controls the export of defense and military related items and goods and services. So here you see that the US export controls apply to a lot of goods. Specifically, if the goods are made in the US, known as the US origin, the goods that are from a different country but have the specific amount of items or spare parts that have been produced by US technology or US government or US state. There is also understanding of US person. US person, if a US person shares information, technology, data, or software with a foreign national, this is an export and may need this may need a specific license or certificate, even if it happens in the US, within the US. This is what we said the deemed export. We talked about EAR. This EAR applies to items as a dual-use items. The dual-use items is that something you can use commercially, but that can actually be turned into the military use. This is called dual-use items. For example, chemicals that we usually use to make ink for ballpoints, the simple ballpoint pens, can also be used to make the chemical weapons. Advanced machinery tools can also be used to build the military jet. And if you work with the dual-use items, you need to be very careful on these. In the next slides, we will see the case regarding this dual use. And actually, regarding this EAR, anyone in the world who exports or re-exports these items, these dual-use items, must follow the EAR export control laws. Although this is the US law, but anyone in the world, if you are producing or using this, you have to comply with the EAR. So you can ask how the European countries are being exposed to US export laws. The European countries handling the US origin items must comply with EAR, export and export controls. Similarly, European countries dealing with the US defense items must obtain the special licenses and certificates for export or transfers. European companies may face the similar penalties if they violate the US sanctions, even if the activity occurs outside the US territory. And here you see also the limitations of US export laws in Europe. Of course, there are some limitations, and actually the extent to which US export laws have power or influence over the European countries depends on the specific context, the nature of laws, and the jurisdictions involved. While US export laws primarily apply to US persons, companies, and goods, they can have the extraterritorial effects that, of course, influences the European countries and businesses, and how you responded to that, how you reacted to this extraterritorial effect of the US law. So, in response to US extraterritorial laws, the European Union has taken the steps to protect its businesses and sovereignty from the extraterritorial application of US laws. The first, it makes the EU blocking statute. This blocking statute is the European Council regulation, and it protects the US countries from the extraterritorial effects of the US sanctions, for example, the Iran sanctions specifically. And also there's the INSTEX, we say it. This is also similar to the blocking statute, protects to some extent the European countries and businesses to being exposed to the US export laws. So the key provisions of this blocking statute and INSTEX is that they prohibit EU companies from complying with the certain EU sanctions and allows the EU companies to recover damages arising from US sanctions. But this is really a very complicated process to prove that on which border, in which side you are in these terms. Are you being still applied to the US export laws, or you are being protected by the blocking statute of EU? This also requires the EU companies to report any effects of the US sanctions to the European Commission. And INSTEX is the instrument in support of the trade exchange. This is a special purpose tool created by the EU to facilitate trade with Iran while avoiding the US sanctions. Here, now we are looking at the EU regulations for international trade. So how you said that there's extraterritorial effect of the US laws, and now we are looking at the EU regulation. The first item is the EU dual use regulation. We already discussed the dual use. So even a tiny items, tiny chemicals, or the spare parts can be subject to can be understood and be subject to the dual-use regulations. This is governments, the export, transfer, brokering, and transit of dual-use goods, and it also requires the export licenses for controlled goods. There is a special list of controlled goods in EU, and we will later talk about such lists in Azerbaijan as well. EU sanctions and embargoes. It prohibits trade with sanctioned regimes like Russia and Iran, North Korea, and restricts certain goods like weapons, oil, and financial services specifically. EU Customs Code, it provides the procedures for the exports, including the declaration, evaluation, identifying the origin of rules, the permits, licenses, the process itself. So we have also the GDPR, the personal data protection, and if the export is envisions, covers the transfer or movement of the personal data outside the European Union, and companies must comply with the GDPR restrictions, GDPR requirements, and rules, of course. And here we see some US enforcement actions in Europe. So we see here the real examples how it affected the US trade laws, affected the European market. So while these laws don't have direct legal authority in European countries, we said that they can exert a significant influence due to their extraterritorial reach and global dominance of the US financial system, of course. This they may have the effect on the not only the US entities and individuals, but also the non-US entities and individuals under certain circumstances. Here we see the cases when such case happened. BNP Paribas in 2014, this is a French bank that was fined up to almost $9 billion US dollars for violating the US sanctions on Sudan, Iran, and Cuba. There is another case when the Chinese company faced with the US penalties for violating the US export controls, impacting the European operations. So actually in this value chain, there was a Chinese companies and European companies, but they have been charged for violating US export controls. The details, of course, I'm pretty sure you can see in the website. There are quite the details of these violations. When violations came up and when your company is being charged for violations, even the most prominent businesses get surprised that would that mean the violation or how they can estimate this as a violation when all the legal documents are in place. And actually, this is what we always say, legal and compliance is not the same thing. For legal, if something on the document is correct, this is okay. For compliance, if everything is in the document is okay, it still may not be okay. Which means that sometimes, like in this example, the two companies are doing the trade relations. They are making a business relationship, all the contracts are in place, documents are in place. But if they have not envisioned some restrictions, some rules, some requirements of the laws, they can be subject to fines, to penalties, and this can be esteemed as the violation. So there is also the case of there was many European countries that have scaled back the operations in Russia to avoid the US secondary sanctions. And even not the US secondary sanctions due to the recent political geo-situation in the region, especially tension relations with Russia and Europe. There are many businesses are being limited with opportunities and scaling back their operations. So as we mentioned, European companies handling US origin items must comply. This is definitely must comply with the EAR. EAR, what is this? This is our Export Administration Regulation of US. And they also have to comply with the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, ITAR, the US laws that we also recently talked about. And for the defense items, European countries need to get the licenses and certificate for exports or transfers. So regarding the sanctions, we know that we have the OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control. The OFAC has the public system for checking the sanctioned entities, so you can use them. And there's also the transactions involving this OFAC rules also affects and applies to the transactions involving the U.S. persons, entities, or the U.S. financial system. And regarding the secondary, one note also on the secondary sanctions. The secondary sanctions target non-U.S. entities for engaging in activities that the U.S. government deems contrary to its foreign policy or national security interests. And these secondary sanctions are the examples of the Iran, North Korea, Russia. These are the secondary sanctions as well. And here is the case. After this case, I will open up a short time frame for the questions and answers until the topics that we have discussed. But here, I would like to see the case. This is the real case, not the imaginary case. So during the war, the Iraq War, the U.S. and its coalition forces, they founded the improvised explosive devices with the parts made in the U.S. How did they get there? Then, after the long investigations, it was found out that there is a company in Minnesota who have been shipping the 6,000 pieces of radio equipment to a company that claimed it will be used in Singapore for a telecommunications project, but apparently it hasn't happened. So they were shipped to Iran and from Iran to Iraq, and they were used for preparing the remotely denotating the explosive devices. So you remember I said that sometimes the goods and services that we are exporting can at the end be used against ourselves. So be very careful. And this comes to the items that we need to know all the information before the export process starts. Here, I would like to get your questions. Please feel free to provide your questions. Oh, no, before the solution. I'm trying to see what questions we have here. No questions so far?
Everything has been so clear that no questions seems to be.
Okay. Okay, no problem. We continue. So, what is the solution? How we can keep ourselves protected? The first item is to understand who is your customer. Are they on a restricted party list? Are they on a denied entities list? What is their history? What they have been done before? What they are doing now? And there are certain people and companies cannot receive exports or can only receive them if the deal is licensed, regardless of the export globally. So the first step here is to understand whom you are working with. And the next is the what. What are you exporting? Is it regulated under ITAR or EAR? Is it on the commercial control list? Is it on the U.S. munition list? This is also under the ITAR. And what is the export classification? Is it dual use? As I mentioned, the dual use part is quite specific here, which requires a lot of attention. And what country are you exporting to? Look here, your contracted end delivery can be one country, but afterwards it can be moved or transferred to another country. This can be through the re-export or just transfer or just some legal or illegal movement of items. Some countries also have the sanctions and embargoes that can restrict the exports and require licenses, no matter what you export. So you need to understand, and in the best case, to know exactly the final destination on where these items are being taken at the end. And of course, why they need that. What will the customer do with this product, or how this product match their core business? For example, if the I don't know the real example. For example, just if a furniture company purchases some tiny digital mechanisms, how they are going to use that? Does it match to the core business of what they're doing or not? You have to be very careful on that to understand why. And also the amount. For example, if you are shipping one item in certain amounts, usually to similar companies, and now it turns out that this company wants triple more than the usual usage, or than in compared with the other clients, other similar clients. So this is also the reason to think about why they need it so much. The red flags here, of course, I said that product, if the product doesn't match the business, this is one of the key red flags. Also, if the customer does not provide information about the end user or gives unclear information on the end usage of the item. Yes, sometimes you may think that your role is to sell the goods, and asking too many questions or asking business-specific questions from the client may think that this is my business confidential information, or this is my business secrets, why you need to know that. But if such things happen, this is also the red flags, because in the normal terms, as you and your party is signing the confidentiality agreement, they have to be open to discuss with you and to provide information that you require, especially on the end use of the items. An next red flag is that the customer doesn't really understand product, but wants it anyway. This also means that something goes wrong. Why? Within the examples that I have earlier provided, why this business may need your items. The order terms are unusual. It says that I pay 100% beforehand, or I pay double price, or I need it within a very short period of time, which you think that it's too tense period, or other unusual order terms is also the red flags. And if the buyer makes unusual labeling, packaging requests, for example, they say that please put on the fragile signature on the packaging while it's not fragile, or just not show that it's made in Europe, I don't know in which country, or something else. If this unusual labeling or packaging requests are also the red flags, definitely. And here, the shipping address being the FRAC company, FRAC forwarding company. because in normal terms, the freight forwarding companies are also providing, using these companies are quite okay. But if you don't know where the products will be delivered to, this is the red flag. This should not be the final address, should not be the freight forwarding company. Freight forwarding company is a transferring or intermediary company, but they cannot be the final address to receive the shipping. That's it with that. And here we move to Azerbaijan. So what we have done, we have understand what is the trade compliance, what elements it has. We talked about what are the trade compliance risks, what risks they bring, and how we can mitigate them. We looked on to the U.S. trade laws. We get information about the European Union trade laws and regulations and their correlation and their mutual impact level. We discussed how U.S. laws can be affecting the European market, and we discussed the cases. We have discussed the red flags, and now it's turn to move from the big picture to the narrower picture to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is comparatively new country. This is a post-Soviet country, and despite its short independence existence, around a little more than 30 years, the country has grown a lot and has put in place lots of the laws and regulations almost from scratch. And all the entities, government structures are still ongoing the reforms and improvements. But the key regulatory authorities for import and export in Azerbaijan is the Ministry of Economy. This Ministry of Economy is the policy-making structure. This is the high umbrella. It provides the orders, decrees, and rules for import and export mainly, and handles all spheres of economy, of course. The imports and exports is the area of engagement of the Ministry of Taxes, definitely. The Ministry of Taxes regulates taxes, tariffs, and declarations for taxation. It provides the list for exemption, tax exemptions, concessions, etc. And the key body is the State Customs Committee. This committee regulates the tariffs, all the duties. It executes the full process of the export and import from and to the country. And there is the one system that we say it on window. There is a typo, one window system. In Azerbaijan, there is a one window system. What does it mean? One window system is that electronized system to execute all the stages of import and export through one channel. Before, it was quite complicated. There were different companies, different entities that you need to collect the documents, different timelines for each process, but then they aligned it all together. And this is one window system, is quite appreciated by the local businesses and the foreign businesses as well. This system is for facilitation and simplification of the customs process, and it has a key database for electronic reporting and pre-declaration of goods, and it covers all the stages of imports and exports in general. And here is also the ACTA. We say it ACTA, AFCA, Azerbaijan Food Security Agency. This agency controls import of agriculture and food goods and provides the Import Healthiness, Import Compliance Act for the imported food items. As you see, the food items are of special care, and there is a specific list that we will later discuss about this that provides the specific requirements for specific groups of food items being exported to the country, to Azerbaijan. These entities are the key entities for the managing the imports and exports in Azerbaijan, and the legal framework for this. This is the legal framework. First and utmost for when we are talking about the exports and imports, the first comes to mind is the customs code and the law on customs tariffs. This is the key law and key code which provides the classification of all items and the duty, the tariff rate, the custom rate duties for the specific groups. There was a decree on further liberalization of foreign trade in the Republic of Azerbaijan. This was the key milestone in in bringing up the exports and imports in the country to more or less to the international level. But there are also other laws and decrees specifically that are providing the legal framework for trade. This is the decision 91. This is on the rates of custom duties for export-import operations. This is the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers. The law on custom tariffs provides the rates, but this decision provides the core starting amount of the rate, the initials, how to ratios in comparison with their tariff rates, and etc. There is also the conducting foreign exchange transactions by residents and non-residents of the Republic of Azerbaijan. And this law also covers the part of the trade regulation and provides this decree specifically covers the financial services, financial exchange and transactions by the residents and non-residents. Also, there is a decree of the president on additional measures for the improvement of the regulations of import and export operations. All of these documents are available online. They are open for public. Whether they are in English, no. There can be some informal translations found, but usually the laws, regulations, and the government documents are not being issued in the official translation versions. But in any case, if you plan or if you would like to see the details of this document, just feel free to let us know. We will provide all the support in interpreting specific items that are of interest for you. But I couldn't put all of this, the content here, because this is the huge document. There's a lot of the theory and just the legal wording. But just this is the key legal framework for the trade. And here, a special list consider. There is, in Azerbaijan, there is a rules. Here you see, Annex 2 to the rules on regulations of import and export operations in Azerbaijan. I also provided the link. Also, it's in Azerbaijani, but you may understand some points by the informal translations, available online translations. So there is a list of goods subject to export and import based on decree of the Cabinet of Ministers. So there's a specific list in which if you want to export these goods, you need to get the approval from the Cabinet of Ministers. Let me say that this is very country strategic items like of course, weapons, the high explosive chemicals, and etc. It provides the list of these items. It's not the huge list, but some goods are there. In addition, there is a list of specific goods, the services and intellectual property, specifically subject to export and import with the approval of relevant state authorities. This means that for some specific goods and services and intellectual property, you need to get approval from the specific and relevant authorities. For example, if it's regarding the food, you go to ACTA. If this is regarding some digitalization, communications, and etc. related, there is a specific list of items. If it's in this area, you need to go to the Minister of Communications and receive the permit for this, and etc. I have reviewed the list. Actually, these are also very quite specific items. In general, the general usage items, even if regarding the service and intellectual property, are not in that list. So, but make sure you check this list before proceeding to the business relationships on the exporting or these items and services, of course. There are also the special group permissions of foods. For example, there is if plants and planting goods, there is a requirement for the import quarantine license. If there's agro products, in general, all kinds of foods, and also the food items for the cattle breeding, the ACTA, the AFCA, Azerbaijan Food, what we said earlier, food security agency, yes. ACTA, Azerbaijan Food Security Agency, should provide the specific license, specific license, certificate, and hygienist certificate for these items. And as I mentioned, the IT products, for some products, of course, not all of the IT products are subject to this list. No, there are some specific IT products that need the approval and permit from the Ministry of Communications. So regarding this list as well, as these lists are in Azerbaijan, I haven't shared it here, and these are the comprehensive lists which may not even relevant to area of your interest and to your business, but just in case you seek an advice or you want to check the specific service or the product, feel free to contact us. We will provide the support to check this list. Again, and now we come to the customs stage. The customs, there is a huge consequences when people violate the custom laws by violating the rules and regulations, or bringing or sending the goods and items like weapons, narcotics, alcohol, and etc. Before, in Azerbaijan, the custom systems was not so, digitalized, which was given a room for some violations, let's say, and without being noticed. But nowadays, even the civilians, even when we are as a physical entities, make an online shopping or buy something abroad, and after the visits from the foreign countries, when we buy items, when we come back, the customs clearance is more strict than in other countries, I would say. In what terms strict? I will explain you. We know that there are specific limits for Azerbaijanis to import the items in the value amount. even if it's for personal use or for the business purposes. If you go above that limit, you need to pay the customs duties calculated on that specific item. For example, this is the real case. For the physical entities, we can purchase from the online shopping, etc., anything that we want up to $300. If it goes per month, this is the limit per month. If we go beyond that limit, we need to pay the custom duties calculated on that specific amount. This is for the personal use. This is not for the business purposes. For business purposes, there are also the limits on the amount cap, but these limits are more broadened. This is not like the physical entity. Of course, when we are talking about the business, the subject amount can be even up to 1 million. So this amount is not a problem for the business. However, the custom duties to be properly calculated as per the specific groups of items is very important and necessary. If items are not classified correctly, means that the duty will be calculated for the wrong classification group, and this can mean the possible violations of customs rules, and which leads to costly delays in imports, and it hurts the company, projects, and customers. And if it's the items of food items or items that can get damaged if they stay at the borders for some couple of days or weeks, this means that the loss of the goods that you are importing. So better to make it correctly from the very beginning. So if you break the custom rules, of course, you can expect a huge fines, not only by Azerbaijan party. No, this is related to your country as well. While you are doing an export, you need to follow first your country rules and then consider the receiving party country rules. But don't get frustrated with that. Of course, not all the businesses would know all the rules and regulations in the countries that they are selling the goods, and that's perfectly okay. For this, there are the customs brokers that we will talk later that you can use to make sure that you are in line with the requirements. So we say it's fabulous for of customs. What customs means? There are 4 key elements of customs: classification, valuation, country of origin, and documentation. So now we will see in details what this fabulous 4 mean. So classification. Classification determines what duties or special rules apply to your import. If you don't classify imports correctly, as I said, this means the incorrect calculation of the duty, and this can make your company subject to penalties. And in addition, the customs can delay or hold your shipments because of incorrect classification. And after all the parties want to make sure that bad things are not coming to the country, actually. But what is my advice is, don't classify the imports yourself. Instead, it would be better to get help from the trade compliance teams or the broker companies on the classification. Valuation, this covers on how much is your import worth. This is the total value of the imported from your side, imported items, exported items, and from Azerbaijan side for the imported items. The purchase price, of course, important. but you need to add there the things like packing costs, selling commissions, or other kind of fees and costs, which are the items or services that provide. Sometimes the importer provides free of charge to the producer or supplier of import. In terms of the origin, regarding the valuation, let me also say that the rules for valuation are quite technical. And if you get this valuation also wrong, it can also result in the significant delays. Regarding the country of origin, different countries have different tariffs, rules, and restrictions. There are some rules for the labeling in specific countries. Some countries are the part of the free trade agreement, where they can send certain goods to each other at special discounted rates, etc. And unfortunately, determining the country of origin can be complicated, especially nowadays. So in this case, also that would be that would be recommended to get the assistance on this if your items include some parts produced in other countries as well. And then documentation, always create and keep appropriate documents on imports. The failing to have the correct paperwork will draw back your export process. And customs in Azerbaijan also, sometimes they do audits, but the taxes is more strict on this. Taxes require all the documentation in place very correctly for the exporting company local here in Azerbaijan, because while they will do their tax reporting, if they are not able to provide all the required documentation, properly prepared and properly kept documentation on the items that they have export, they will have a lot of problems with the taxes as well. And every country has a specific law requirement on to what extent the companies need to keep the documents. So check this as well for your country. For Azerbaijan, for the businesses, it's up to the 5 years. They have to keep all the documentation. But there are also, if I'm not mistaken, some addition there for some specific or some sensitive data. They need to keep it for a longer period. So here, I would like you to open your microphones and feel free to rank the following steps. What do you think is the first step to do? If you have seen that some documentation is not in place, or some information in provided document is not coherent with what you have done, or is not coherent with the contract clauses, what you would do first. As this contract has been done at the stage of the previous employee, now he's not there. Now the audit came to your doors and checking, and there are some inconsistency and incoherency in the information. What you would do first? Bringing to the compliance team. Okay, what else? Okay, one more point to bring it to the compliance team. Yeah, actually, you're right. First thing we need to do is to bring it to the compliance team. And then, of course, we need to contact the former employer about the issue, but this also can be different in specific country requirements. This depends on the employment laws or maybe the disclosure of information or just a cultural thing. For example, in Azerbaijan, if such thing happens, the companies have the right to contact the former employer to ask about the issue, and the former employer is supposed to address the question, and so they cannot say that I'm not working with you anymore, so I don't have to tell you anything. But this may differ in different countries as well. So, what can be the common pitfalls, common errors? There are, of course, the common errors that can, in general, delay the shipments and can lead to costly violations. Even with that fabulous force that we have discussed to help you, there are still common mistakes. For example, being too dependent on the third parties. Of course, nobody's perfect. Custom brokers and agents are helpful, but you still need to check their work, because if there is a mistake, guess who will be in trouble? Of course, you and your company. Then the cutting corners. If you are feeling frustrated or overwhelmed with customs, it might be tempting to cut the corners, but that's when the problems actually start. Instead, remember, good compliance takes the teamwork. Ask an expert in the company for help, or ask a colleague for an advice. Ignoring mistakes from others, customs paperwork can pass through many people, and maybe you notice someone else's mistake and think that's not my job. The truth that it's everyone's job, and you must report any errors or any mistakes you find to the trade compliance team. And even if you think that you have did your task correctly, but the fault is or mistake is the other's mistake, make sure you clarify it, you report it. And incorrect valuation, we talked about this, that the incorrect valuation is also the subject to the serious consequences, as the incorrect valuation means incorrect calculation of the custom duties, which is at the end brings to the customs valuations and the tax valuations as well. And consider the expert. Specifically, now as you are planning to do the business with Azerbaijan, keep this in mind, the export. For Azerbaijan, unless the specific issues, it's not a problem to get the goods and to re-export it to the other countries. And you need to consider then your country requirements on this. And if your country laws and regulations, what kind of limitations they provide. Azerbaijan now in a geopolitical situation that has a very good linkage with the neighboring countries, including Russia and the north. And considering that a lot of sanctions in Europe limit the business transactions or business dealings of European companies with Russia. Actually, they cannot do this. They are not able because of the sanctions. Consider that Azerbaijan is the potential for this. I don't say it's negative or it's positive. Just keep in mind. I will say you one example. Here you see this is the screenshot from the news, from the media. This is regarding the Bentley, the expensive British cars. Before US exports, you see here the first chart. UK car exports. In terms of UK car exports, this is the trend for Azerbaijan. Throughout this last 20 years, the trend was more or less the same. And after 23, it came to the peak. So why? Does in 2023, Azerbaijan people get so rich that they started immensely using the luxury British cars? Not, of course. So this gives the room, and this was a huge case discussed all over the media that, Azerbaijan is being used by Russian oligarchs or the British side to sell their items at the end through Azerbaijan. And you see, there was a 1,000%, almost 2,000% increase, not the 100%, but the 2,000% increase in the export to Azerbaijan. And from Azerbaijan to Russia, car export from Azerbaijan to Russia, if we see what we were exporting to Russia, it was more or less the similar throughout that, but starting from the 22, it, of course, consequently with this also went up. So the investigators were talking about that the British car makers appear to have continued selling hundreds and millions of pounds of luxury vehicles to Russia through the former Soviet states, and the counterparty, the Bentley, has provided the media the speech that they are not aware of this, and their compliance systems are regulating the delivery until this means that roughly saying that we are controlling the process until Azerbaijan. What happens after Azerbaijan is not within their control. So this is also for you to keep in mind. This may be okay, or this may not be okay. This is up to your country's laws and regulations to decide. For Azerbaijan, there is no limitation because Azerbaijan has not sanctioned Russia, or Azerbaijan is not being subject to sanctions. So nowadays, Azerbaijan is more an open market. So, but this happens. I just wanted to inform you. Actually, you see here, cars are among the. Oops, sorry. Oh, I get. Oh my God, where I get. Yes, cars are among the items banned from Russia under the so-called dual-use sanction regime. So they think that even these luxury cars can be dual use. What we have said, we said that dual use is the use for the civilian and military purpose. And now they may consider that these luxury cars can be also for the military purposes, but how you can prove that? This is the journalist discussion going around. So this is a little bit of, of course, Bentley has not been charged for this because they have proved all this documentation and all the process was in compliance, as they are regulating it until the delivery to Azerbaijan. Because in Azerbaijan, if a physical person buys it, for example, if I bought that Bentley and then I decided to sell it to Russian oligarch, this is not under the control. So this is my personal decision. I am selling my personal item if I buy it from another company and etc. So just keep in mind that. Any reflections on this case? I would like to hear from you. What do you think about this interesting case? Have you heard anything similar? And what do you think about the possible cases in your context or in your countries? Yes, please.
Actually, we are quite aware of the increase of export from other countries, from Russia, former Soviet Union countries, but not Azerbaijan that much. But isn't it so that the land border with Azerbaijan and Russia is still closed, but the import and export, they are capable to do that? Is it so?
Yes, actually, the borders are closed. The Azerbaijan land borders are currently closed, but it is not closed for the trucks and exports and imports. No, it's closed only for civilians and only for the physical purposes. For example, if I want to go to Georgia through the land border, I cannot. But if I ship goods or I export goods from other countries coming from the Georgia or from Turkey, that's okay. For the imports and exports, the lands are not closed. So this is fully available, and you can still use the land borders. It's closed for the physical entities, civilians, to just use it for personal purposes, actually. That's the situation. Any other
and
reflection?
also,
yes.
Yeah, no question, but we also had a sanctions webinar a few months ago, and it is published on our web page, and we can send a link after this also to this webinar, so you can find more information from Central Baltic view about the sanctions.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I see here the comment that it's not much relevant because it's the partly remotely services. Okay. I will come to that part as well regarding the services, providing the services. Okay. If we can move. So the guidance on the export, the process itself. So the first is the negotiation. You identify the quantity, you check the classification, you estimate the value of the items, and you follow these steps, and of course identify the country of origin. You define the transportation mode, the air, road, ship. As I mentioned, currently all the methods are available for Azerbaijan, either from the roadways, land borders, air, or shipment. Shipment, specifically, it covers the huge weighted items and through the Caspian Sea only. So the contract stage, you need to do the screening, sanctions, and due diligence check. You need to check the authenticity of the document, and keep in mind to add the contract terms to include the ABC and sanction clauses. And you need to agree upon the payment terms, and you need to identify the freight forwarding company and check this company as well. Check, of course, the delivery address and the get licenses and permits if needed, of course. This is the contract stage for that. And post-deal, after the contract is signed, after you have negotiated the items, the contract have been signed, and what you need to do the further is to keep all original documents. For the banks in Azerbaijan, you need to submit the payment and contract documents, the invoices, etc., to the bank to receive your payment, and to Azerbaijan party to proceed the payment. Because if Azerbaijan party wants to pay for the services even abroad, we need to submit the contract, signed contract, the invoices and handover acts, etc., so that the banks will proceed the payment, because without them, the banks will not proceed the payment. Okay, you may need to agree about the brokerage services because we will talk about the use of brokerage services and how they are useful at that stage. And we need to keep the order, shipment proof, etc. for the customs clearance, which we will also tell about what specific documents are needed for the customs clearance. And the broker, if you are working with a broker companies are preparing for the customs and clearance. Regarding the export guidance for the services, exporting the services to Azerbaijan is much more easier than, of course, the goods and items. The export of services, the key here to consider is the contract terms. What will be your roles and responsibilities. It should be very clear. And nowadays, the companies are paying more attention to make a breakdown of the cost or value or the price of the services because working also in a huge oil and gas company, we also want to receive the service contract for the payment or the service contracts. We pay specifically attention not to have the general service group. Let's see, sometimes we see that business support services, this is not acceptable, or the marketing services, this is not acceptable, or the general identification of the service in the contract is not acceptable. You need to be clear on what kind of service. This can be, for example, marketing services for elaborating the project name, this project, or providing the, I don't know, the idea is that the service should not be general service group. This is the business support services or the marketing services or the financial services. This is too generic, and the banks are also very tricky on this, saying that this is the group of services, not the service specifically. So you need to specify the service and the duration, the payment terms. Of course, the payment terms, you can also require some part of the advance payment, but usually in the country accepted the advance payment rate is 20 or 30% maximum. There can be very few, maybe even zero companies that agree to pay the 50% of advance. The general practice is the 20-30% of advance payment, and also clarify in the contract the terms of the payments after the delivery of work. And you have to provide the act of delivery and act of acceptance of the service to proceed for the payment, because without the act of delivery, the act of delivery is being prepared by the service provider and specifies what services have been provided, when, why, how, and if there are quantifiable quality or quantity indicators, they should be added there. After that, the receiving party approves and signs of the handover act, which means the acceptance act. After that, you can be paid. In general, there is no limit for the services, which kind of services cannot be provided in the country, no. But the special attention and special care should be given to the tax item here, tax purpose here, because for some kind of services or with the country regime, you can be subject to the double taxation in your country and here in Azerbaijan country. Usually, if the service provider is a foreigner and the service is being provided not in Azerbaijan, and if the service is provided outside country by the not as a non-Azerbaijani person, non-resident, then you are not subject to any taxes in the country. But there is a recommendation to check it with the specific service and specific counterparties that you are working with regarding the tax rules. Because some entities here in Azerbaijan are subject to VAT, some are not, some are the small and medium enterprises, some are the big enterprises. So the taxation here is quite complicated. So before entering the contractual relations, you need also to clarify the taxation if you are providing the services in your country, partly or fully online. Just check it. And also the payment terms I have already mentioned. What else can be my advice? As I mentioned, this in general, there is no limitations for the services to be provided in the country, but your purchasing party can be questioned why they haven't acquired this service locally by their shareholders. For example, the big companies like the SOCAR, the state-owned company, we have the government strategy for the nationalization of the sourcing and expertise base, while we are acquiring the services, and this is not only SOCAR, but the huge entities in Azerbaijan, when they are acquiring the services from abroad, they need to give a good rationale or justification that why the service doesn't exist or why the level of service that is provided here in the locally in the country is not sufficient for them. So, but this is not always the issue, but maybe an issue. So, but this is the responsibility of your purchasing part. So the party who is exporting this, the local entity. So the responsibility is not on you, but the responsibility is on the exporting party to understand and justify, or being able to justify, if questioned, why this service has been purchased from abroad. Then I promised you to talk about a little bit more about the Incoterms. So Incoterms, as I mentioned, this is not the law, this is not legally binding, but this is the recommendations for the international trade, and the Incoterms are the used in contracts related to the sale and delivery of goods, and they cover aspects such as transfer of ownership, payment amounts, and the currency exchange issues. The Incoterms are guidelines in international trade to clarify the responsibility of buyers and sellers. There are four key groups. There are lots of the sub and the categories, etc. But I just tell you briefly about the four key groups, EFCD. This describes the level of responsibility on the buyer or the seller, how it moves to the different groups. So while you are planning to export and to your counterparty, buying party, you need to discuss in between yourselves to identify the Incoterms. These are the parts of the contract. It's not the contract itself, but they are the internationally used terminology, internationally used methods of payment and responsibility and liability to be included into your contract. So Group E describes that it describes more responsibility on the buyer. The seller ensures that the goods are the seller's premises and another named location, where the buyer loads and clears the goods for export. In the Group F, the seller is responsible for delivering the goods to the buyer's pre-agreed method of transportation. And after this, the buyer takes the responsibility for the cost and risk. In the Group C, the seller bears the responsibility for all costs until the final destination port. And once the goods are loaded onto the port, the risk transferred to the buyer. And the D, the seller has full responsibility for the goods up until the named place of destination. So this is while you will do the contract, you will see the input terms. Under each group, there's a coding name. I didn't consider it here because not to overload with too much theory, but be careful on understanding the responsibilities and liabilities that are on the seller and buyer. And in terms of the terms of sale, which method will be payment? Which method of payment will be used? How you will be paid? When you will be paid for your goods? It also depends on the terms of sales under the Incoterms. Why was the Incoterms recommended? Because it clarifies all the stage. So there is a different payment methods: cash in advance, letter of credit of the time draft and side draft. There is collection for the side draft and the collection for the draft, and open account. This all depends on your negotiation with the counterparty. Here you also see the key risks for exporters for each of them, and key risks for importers for each of the methods of payment. As you see here, if there's no risk for exporters for cash in advance, of course, there is no risk for importers with the open account. So there are also the risks going up and down depending on the types of the method of payment. In Azerbaijan, as I mentioned, the key payment terms used for the export of services is there some amount cash payment. I mean, not cash, some advance payment within the, as I mentioned, 2030. This is the practice, but it depends. You may agree even for higher. There is no limit. There is no cap on how much you can pay.
Sorry, Sevda, your voice is a little bit breaking up, at least on my side.
Sorry, what about now?
Now it's great. Thanks.
Okay, so I was saying that the advance payment, some part of the general practice is 20-30% in the country, but this is not the cap, or there is not the limit. You can agree for the higher rates of advance payment depending on your counterparty and depending on your negotiation. In general, nowadays, all the payments in Azerbaijan are being done through the bank account and bank transfers. If not done through the bank, then the entities are not able to prove their expenses in the tax service, because now the tax structure is changed in a way that the cash expenditures are not being recognized for the taxation purposes. So this will be considered as the income of the entity. So, but this is the responsibility of the local Azerbaijani party, I mean. And so, regarding the brokerage services, there are many in Azerbaijan, so and like in all countries all over the world. What they do is they prepare customs declaration forms in compliance with the customs procedures. They represent the client in the customs, in the cargo, custom operations, preparations for custom declarations, transit, cargo, passenger vehicles, any type of it. And they also represent the client in the Baku State Road Police if the exported goods are related to the transportation vehicles or something else like this. They provide the logistics, international shipping, and they also do the taxation and preparing tax declaration. So if you are exporting, you and your counterparty can agree on the brokerage services, which brokerage services or company to use and in what capacity to use. The general practice is to use either only for customs declaration forms or also for the representation in the client, which means that the brokers will spend time in the customs physically to represent you, to make all the documentation issue, to accept the goods, to observe the loading process, to count the items if needed, and etc. So again, this depends on your negotiation with your counterparty, but actually the using of brokerage services makes life much more easier because they on a daily basis they do know the changing complexity of the custom regulations. They know it by heart, the customs clearance process and which documents to submit. Yeah, and they save, of course, on the enterprise resources. Of course, there can be the entities that are pretty confident in that they can handle the custom process themselves, including the filling up the custom declaration and processing all the process. But not all of the enterprises are mature on this. And just note that all the goods exported to Azerbaijan needs to be reported to the customs before they arrive the country, before they enter the country. So once the export process started, there's an electronic customs declaration process, and the broker companies are doing this. You are just providing them the document, and they are making a customs declaration on behalf of the seller and the buyer on the electronic system of customs. In practice, this responsibility is not on the seller. The responsibility is on the buyer party. But the seller party should be aware of this because they will need to provide some documents required by the broker companies. So if I buy something from your side, this is my responsibility to ensure that items have been declared in the customs before. This is very important, before they enter the country, because once they enter the country and the customs declaration have not been done, this is subject to penalty in many cases. So what documents are needed for customs clearance? This is indicative list, general list. Depending on the specific items, the list can change. But what is generally what is needed? Of course, the contract, the purchase agreement, purchase order, pro forma invoice, commercial invoice, and this is the documentation part of the contract documentation, and then the goods documentation. Who is the sender? Who is the receiver? What is the invoiced amount? What's the weight? What's the country of origin? The classification code, as I discussed in the very beginning, and the customs value. So not just the cost of the invoiced amount, but the customs value as well. Then the third group of documents is the transportation document, the transportation orders, transportation mode through which the transportation is coming. Here, if the transportation is through airways, then no pre-declaration is required. It's required once the airlines arrive to the country, then the customs declaration is required. And here, the driver details, if it's by road, the transported by the road, driver details is also required. Then the short import-export declarations. This is the declarations that we said are required before goods entering the market. Transit customs declaration. Of course, if there are transits going anywhere else, still there is required a transit customs declaration. logistic company details, the logistic document, export document from the seller side. These are the requests from the seller side. And as we discussed, if it's the food items, then ACTA permits are required. And it's strongly advised to receive these permits well beforehand that the export start, because if the items are food items, they are very vulnerable to get damaged. That's why not to delay with the permit. Timely, this permit should be received timely. And of course, goods offloading venue details. The document describing where the load goods will be offloaded and provided. As we mentioned, better not to have the address with the freight forwarding company or to make sure that it is authorized by the end users that the goods will be offloaded in the premises of the freight forwarding company. So here is one more last case. Ida is a customs broker. Ida is a company representative, and she is going to use a customs broker to submit information to customs for clearance of the imported goods. What do you think? Which of the following questions should ask Aida before she provides information to the broker for submission to customs? The key, very most important question. What do you think? Type in the message box. I will see what you have here. So what do you think? Should Aida ask about was the customs broker selected and authorized by compliance team, or her primary concern should be are providing the customs broker with all the information they will need to make submissions, or will the customs broker return the copy of the submission so you can double check their word if you prioritize them? Okay, let me go ahead with that. The first priority should be if the customs broker selected and authorized by the compliance team, if you have, if not the legal. And then, of course, you need to ask what kind of information you are providing to the brokers, and whether this information is sensitive, not sensitive, to what level sensitive, and does they really need this information. You have to make sure that you are not providing more and you are not providing less information than it's needed. And of course, you need all the documents back from the customs broker to double check their work. So as you said in the very previous slides, don't rely on the third parties fully. Even if you get the support from the third parties, you need to check, to double check. So here, if we would like to define the risk, here are some cases. For example, the supplier gave me the classification number, so I just use it to fill out the paperwork. Do you think this is the high risk or low risk? Yeah, this is high risk because we cannot just rely on the classification number. We said that we need to check it ourselves as well. If this import passes through several countries, but I'm only focusing on the last one before it gets out. This is also high risk because we should not focus on the last one only that gets us. And I found a company with a lot of experience importing our kinds of goods, but I also asked the trade compliance team to confirm if we could use them. Is this high risk or low risk? I would say this is low risk because it's a good practice that this person is asked the compliance team to confirm. This is low risk. And the country for origin was hard to determine, but I did a lot of research online and eventually figured it out. Of course, this is the low risk because they're making sure that you have all the information and you are clearly defined the country for origin is very important. So in summary, what we have discussed today, that the trade compliance mandates all the companies to adhere trade regulations that apply their international business operations. We restated that the trade compliance covers not only the import-export, but also customs duties, taxes, and all other stages of export. We defined that the trade compliance puts certain requirements on the companies, and at the same time, it brings a lot of benefits for our businesses. The landscape of trade compliance consists of people, processes, papers, and policies. So we should look at it as the one system, as a one complete unit, let's say. Continuing, everyone in the company should be involved in the trade compliance. This is not only the role of the marketing person, salesperson, or the compliance person. And the trade compliance is the ongoing process to be aware of the risks and the changing rules and regulations. You have to be well before as aware and keep you updated through the proper compliance program or the audit or the consultancy services that you may receive. And special attention should be given to the international trade of dual-use goods. Make sure that the goods that you are exporting cannot be creatively used for the dual-use purposes. And unnecessarily complex transactions, non-transparent and inexperienced business partners bring more risks to your company as well, and this should be avoided. And in general, Azerbaijan is open for the exports and the trade partnership with the European countries. However, while doing the businesses with Azerbaijan, you have to consider both the country-specific requirements that we have listed and your country-specific rules and regulations as well. In general, for Azerbaijan, while doing the export, make sure everything is done digitally. Every document and copies are available, both in digital and the physical forms. Check the customs duties and the classification and the taxation purposes through the local Azerbaijani consultants or the website if there will be some language availability of the document, or through the broker companies, as they are perfectly aware of all the trends. And be careful on the contract terms, payment terms. As I mentioned, make sure that all the terms are well agreed unanimously in the contract. And what's next? Our next webinars will be focused on how to create this effective trade compliance program and how to manage the third-party risk management, including how to do the specific functional checks and due diligence. Practical and technical skills will be delivered to you. And the third webinar will be focused on the intellectual property rights. However, if you have any points specifically under this group to be discussed, feel free to present it to the coordinator. We will make sure to cover it as well. Saying this, I'm opening the floor for the questions and answers. Feedback, comments, reflections, please.
Thank you, Sevda, for a very thorough, practical and helpful presentation. Now it's a good time if you have some questions, please just open your microphone or put it on the chat. So please go ahead.
Here I see.
I also put the chat. I also put the chat next webinars you have on the slide, the dates. The webinar 2, establishing an effective trade compliance, is on the 15th of April, 9 a.m. We will send more info via email to you all. And the third webinar, compliance with intellectual property rights, is on the 29th of April at the same time. And also this webinar is being published on our website, and we will send the link to you all. You can get to know about the info and return back to it if you want. And also we will share these slides afterwards to everyone.
I think there is no question. I don't know if everything was clear or nothing was clear.
Everything seems to be very clear. Thank you, Sevda, so much again. Hope to see you also all in future webinars. And I would like to say at the end that if you are interested in doing business with Azerbaijan, please contact your local chambers in Latvia and Estonia, and in Finland, Satakunta University, so we can help. We have one upcoming trip to Azerbaijan with companies coming in October, and also we are hosting quite soon a delegation from Azerbaijan coming to Central Baltic, Finland, Estonia, and Latvia, early April. But in any case, please keep in touch with us if you are interested in cooperating. So, thank you, Sevda, and thank you all for your time, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much, everyone. See you at this next webinar. Bye-bye.